yourself. Because what they do in other schools with an integrated system, they don't even feel pharma as a subject. It's already integrated into the other organ systems. It's like they discuss drugs along the way. Imagine, it's a board subject, but the approach to it is discuss it along the way. That is not minimizing the importance of pharmacology, but it's actually a different approach, because back in your pre-med days, you were used to having it as a separate subject. So sometimes when you end up nurses, when you end up in the wards, in the clinical setting, you sometimes have a hard time retrieving it because it's hard to correlate drugs to your pathophysiology subject, right? So when you talk about pharmacology as being integrated into the organ systems, you correlate it to what you see in the patient, what you hear from the patient. You just don't think of it as a separate shelf, as a separate set of shelves of drugs. You are not, pharmacists even are trained to correlate clinically. Who are pharmacists? Raise your hand. Raise your hand properly. You're even trained to still correlate clinically, right? So sometimes we think of our subjects because of our old curriculum. We are used to putting our subjects in separate shelves, right? When retrieval time comes, it's like we got thrown a big box of puzzle pieces and you have a hard time putting that together. Does it feel that way? Think of it this way. With the old traditional curriculum, we were made to feel, I also went through that. We were made to feel like our subjects are different disciplines, pharma, patho, that they were like separate shelves, right? And when the earthquake comes, which is internship or even third year, where you have to put the puzzle pieces together, it feels like an earthquake, not a transition. Because you feel like you've been shaken and you're forced to put those puzzle pieces together. And you have a hard time doing it. It's one of the reasons why the curriculum must change. When I reviewed for board exam, I did it by organ systems because I cannot put everything together. So if you recall, maybe you have recordings of the previous organ systems that we dealt with, especially the respiratory. I think I made the effort there to actually integrate it into your PD, into your pathology, into your micro. That is actually how you should study. I remember the feeling of that lecture in respite. It felt like studying all the subjects together. But it was one organ system, right? And that is how you should approach it when you study. Who was your USMLE reviewer? Who's already starting to read it? Anybody? Now, if you have it, if you take the time to scan through it, it's actually by organ systems already the approach. Under cardiovascular, you have there the biochem. Actually, biochem is separated, but we're trying to integrate it as much as we can. But there you have the physiology, the histo, the anatomy, even the pharmacology part. It's integrated. So I hope how are you doing with the organ systems day so far? You look sad. But actually when the time comes when you review for the boards and when you approach patients, how do you approach patients? By anatomy? By pathology? Don't you branch off to the clin path? Don't you branch off to your PD? Don't you branch off? Don't you need your pharma? So actually when you approach the patient, it's already integrated. And that is why we're doing it in the basic sciences already. So that you would know where to put those puzzle pieces of subjects. It just feels new and everything new is scary. Does it feel scary? But what will equalize that scary feeling of, we're usually scared of anything new, right? What will equalize that? Are you learning? I still don't see nuts. Oh my goodness. You're not learning? You know what? The whole aim of every course, is to produce learners who realize that they've learned. You're not learning? So you don't know how to auscultate? You don't know how to auscultate heart sounds? And the locations? Wala, di man sila mo respond. Are you learning or are you somehow learning but feeling overwhelmed? Okay. But I think you're learning. You have, okay, before I start, just this, one last thing. All of you have a big dream. What's your big dream? Mag-doktor ko. I want to be a doctor. How long have you said that? Since you were 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old? Whatever you dream, it's any big dream is supposed to be overwhelming in the process of trying to reach that dream, accomplish that dream. Okay? Even basic kind of question, are you learning? No, not. Are you learning? Of course, yes, or somehow something getting through? Okay, why did I open it that way? Wala pa nakatutunan. What did I say at the beginning? With my reduced lecture hours, I don't have the time to feed you everything. So the purpose of the lectures is not to feed you everything because I think most of you will just fall asleep or forget that the moment you walk out of the door. Am I talking too fast? But the purpose of the lectures is to teach you how to approach your textbook and how to learn it by yourself. How to correlate by yourself eventually. It's very deep. It's very dark. Hindi siya bright enough. It's dark. Why is it dark? Okay, for the genitourinary system drugs. Okay, I want to know. Everybody can download videos? Everybody? Or anybody interested in replaying? But I don't think you need to replay. We already went through the diuretics. Right there. At the back, can you follow? Okay. I hope you have your reviewers like Bibles. If it's not clear here, I can always tell you the page where you can refer to. Okay na? Bright enough? Okay, I'm not going to put that in the slideshow yet. So, drugs for genitourinary disorders are, we're going to review. We cover this in cardiovascular, diuretics, urinary tract antispasmodics, erectile dysfunction therapy drugs. For the hormonal contraceptives, we're going to take this up for the endocrine organ system. So, review of diuretics. How do I usually start? Remember the checklist? For the diuretics chapter, you know where that is? Please follow in your Katzong book so you can clearly see where I'm going. That's in chapter 15 of your Katzong reviewer. Please go to the checklist. Why do I want to emphasize the checklist? Of course, it enumerates what you need to know. At the same time, it also points out the clinical applications that are very common, very high yield in board exams. For example, I like this checklist very much. For one thing, it asks you to list the 5 major types of diuretics and relate them to their sites of action. From the diagram, from the very first diagram in that chapter, are you following at the back? From the very first diagram, you already have the pair-ups of those 5 major classifications and their sites of action. So PCT, let's review this. What is PCT? Proximal convoluted tubule, wherein the carbonic anhydrase inhibitors will act, acetazolamide for example. TAL, thick ascending loop of Henle. And of course, they're called the loop diuretics. Most common, furosemide. Furosemide came out in the last exam, right? And it was all about fluid overload. And that's what you just give. It's still being very commonly used. You will still see that in your internship. DCT, distal convoluted tubule. CCT, what? Cortical connecting ducts for the potassium sparing. So if you notice, they're all paired up. And the drugs that modify water excretion, osmotic diuresis, it acts on all sites. Most commonly, still being commonly used is mannitol. For the ADH agonist, desmopressin, ADH antagonist, conivaptan. So let's just take, we have tables for the rest, but for the osmotic diuresis, mannitol for example, they used to commonly use it as a diuretic, but nowadays they have discovered other drugs, so it's not commonly used anymore. But mannitol, where can you find it most commonly? Nurses. Where in surgery? For brain injury, brain edema, right? What does it do? Let's start with the osmosis first. Remember physiology. Osmosis is the movement of water through a semi-permeable membrane through a concentration gradient. Remember those keywords. It will haunt you all the way to board exam and all the way to your clinical practice. So clinically, what does mannitol do? So you inject it into the veins. It goes, let's go to the brain first. Interesting gamay. It goes to your cerebral vessels, goes what? To the capillaries. Intravascularly, where is the mannitol now? Inside the blood vessel or outside in the interstitial space? Where will it stay? Inside, intravascularly. Now, as an osmotic diuretic, or with its osmotic effect, what will it do in the brain interstitium? The brain parenchyma. What condition do we have in brain injury? We have brain edema, accumulation of fluid in the brain parenchyma or the brain tissue. We want to take away that fluid. So with the mannitol, providing added osmotic pressure inside the blood vessel, what will it do? It will pull away the water from the brain tissues and will bring it all the way down to the kidneys for excretion, the extra water from the brain. That's one specific function. Are you getting it? That is why you have experience as, for those who graduated as nursing, you're familiar with mannitol being prescribed in patients with brain injury or brain edema. Are you getting the osmosis? Automatic na osmosis sa inyong mind? Because again, we're going to talk about gradients. I hope you study this very well in your physiology. Osmosis, flow of ions. So that's for your osmotic diuresis. But in general, it's mainly used for brain edema. For ADH antagonists, for ADH agonists, desmopressin. What does ADH do, by the way? What is ADH? Do you notice I'm not feeding you anything? I'm not giving you notes. But I want you to listen for about the applications of what you're going to read by yourselves later. Antidiuretic hormone. Another name? Vasopressin. What are its receptors? Remember the V1 and the V2? The reason why it's also called vasopressin because it has an effect on the vascular walls as well. And that V1 will cause vasoconstriction. Press the vascular vessels. Okay? You get the V1. The V2 is where it has the antidiuretic effect. So two effects actually. Vasopressor, that's why it's called vasopressin, and as antidiuretic on the So an example, prototype is desmopressin. So when do you give this? Have you taken up, even in physiology, have you taken up types of diabetes? So you have mellitus and insipidus. So what is the mechanism of diabetes insipidus? Lack of ADH for the central diabetes, for the central DI or central diabetes insipidus. And the second type, nephrogenic diabetes insipidus. So, let's say as an agonist, meaning it will imitate ADH for desmopressin. Where do you need, where will it take effect? For the central or nephrogenic? For the pituitary, right? Where does ADH come from, by the way? From the? Where? Where is it synthesized? Hypothalamus. On what nuclei? There's, it still comes out in board exams, by the way. From when I took the board exam, dugay na to siya, but reviewing 10 years worth, and I think wala pa man mutate. I don't think the brain has mutated in that aspect. It always comes out in 10 years worth of physiology test papers. So don't forget the mnemonics. OSA, posterior, no, in part, the nuclei in the hypothalamus. Posterior nuclei for the oxytocin, the site of synthesis. This will not come out in the quiz, by the way, in the exam. It's just still correlating and integrating with you. Are you getting the process? Are you getting what I'm trying to do? And then supraventricular nuclei in the hypothalamus will produce your ADH. That's the diuretic hormone. It will travel. It will flow towards the posterior pituitary gland for storage and gets released as needed. You remember that now? So, desmopressin as a replacement will work for the central or pituitary type. Now, there's a question there in your checklist. Why am I focusing on this? Because it's in the checklist. It guided me. No. And to also emphasize to you later when you study, look at the question there. Second to the last bullet for the checklist. Describe a method for reducing urine volume in nephrogenic diabetes insipidus. If desmopressin will not work in nephrogenic diabetes insipidus, what will work? You want to find that? This is the reason why I did not do that. Because I want you to read along with me. Because if I just give it to you outright in bulleted keywords, you will not follow with your book. You will just read my slides. It's so easy to copy-paste the keywords there. It's so much easier and I'll just read them and that's the end, right? But I'm walking you through the process of how you study your book. Because I will not presume that it's automatic to all. So maybe this will help. So, agonists. Okay, like in the Bible, page 149 for the diuretic chapter. Look at the portion in the last paragraph in the first column at the back. I hope you're following. So, look at that sentence there. ADH and desmopressin are useful in pituitary diabetes insipidus. No value in nephrogenic form. So, what's the therapy method there? By salt restriction, water restriction, thiazides, and loop diuretics may be used. Why? So these therapies will reduce blood volume, a very strong stimulus to the proximal tubule reabsorption. So the proximal tubule rather substitutes the cortical collecting tubule in its function for reabsorbing water. A substitution of the proximal tubule, it substitutes the function. Because mainly, where does water reabsorption mainly occurs? It's supposed to be in the collecting ducts, right? Because of ADH. But, again, what is wrong? The B2 receptors are defective in nephrogenic diabetes insipidus. So with that method, water restriction, salt restriction, thiazides, loop diuretics, it stimulates the proximal tubule to double time in reabsorbing and water, and where sodium goes, water follows. To stimulate its reabsorptive function. To maximize, to max out. Who's familiar with credit cards? Nobody? Okay, good students, no credit cards. Anyway, so you get the point? The method there. Since desmopressin, the ADH replacement or agonist, is not useful in nephrogenic diabetes insipidus, with this method, the 4 examples, the proximal tubule is made to substitute the function of water reabsorption because the collecting tubules are dysfunctional. Are you following at the back?
Inhibitors, where do they act on the
I hope we finally got the checklist of our diagram. So inhibits carbonic
we're crossing up the
anhydrase.
checklists one by one. So bicarbonate
So that's one
reabsorption is
checklist.
blocked and sodium is excreted with bicarbonate. Remember your seaports? We're correlating. So that's what happens.
The very small thing.
Right on Hitch. We Filipinos are very fond of Hitch. I see that in the parking lot talaga. Like, after exam, laan. So Hitch na. So the same for sodium, it's trying to reach one of the systems that sodium is reabsorbed is hitching with bicarbonate in a seaport. So I think you'll remember that better. So what happens here? If you go into the other antidiuretic agents,
So you know the
mechanism of action.
How do you study them again?
That first drug reaction.
You can study them
If you
in
don't-
table form,
if-
organize your
if
mind.
you do-
But
if you
use your
miss
imagination as you apply
bicarbonate,
the
because it's not
mechanism of
reabsorbing.
action to the clinical indications.
You will end up
And again, the adverse drug reactions, as you go through there from the mechanism of action. Too much of it will result in physiology.
You cannot stop it.
So what happens
So for
here?
the
You call it metabolic when it involves the kidney, right? So this involves the kidney, so you already label it as metabolic. What is the effect of bicarbonate? Does it make the system acidic or basic? Basic. So the blood needs it to go to the more basic side. Maintaining that 7.34, 7.35. Sakto ba? 7.35 to 7.4. Okay. To maintain that slightly basic pH in the blood, one of the strongest contributor to that is the bicarbonate. Remember the buffer system of the blood? And the most important part of that is your bicarbonate. Now, with carbonic anhydrase inhibitors, because you want the patient to control the fluid balance of the patient, and you want him or her to excrete more sodium along with the bicarbonate, or it's the only drug available. So if you will end up with, if too much of it, you need to watch out for metabolic acidosis. Other uses of it is for glaucoma, eye drops. What is glaucoma, by the way? Increase intraocular pressure because of the accumulated fluid. There are mechanisms, they're non-obstructive, or too much is being produced. So one of the ways to do that is to reduce the accumulation of fluid there. So you want to prevent sodium from too much. You want less sodium to go into the vitreous space. And where sodium goes, water follows, remember? So if less sodium goes in, less water will accumulate. For glaucoma, what else? What happens to mountain climbers? They go up, less oxygen. So it's also used for mountain sickness. So next. For loop diuretics, furosemide, you know a brand name? Start familiarizing with brand names. Because in your PD, you also take a history of the medications, right? And And sometimes the patient will only tell you, what are you taking for your heart failure? Lasix? You're not going to ask the patient, what's a generic ana? Do you do that? It's best if you also bring your memes. Well, you have your memes. Get a copy of memes or a drug formulary. Because sometimes the patient will only remember the brand names, but there's always Google, and we have mobile data. Okay. So Lasix, one common brand name for furosemide. Mechanism of action again, inhibits sodium potassium chloride transporter in the thick ascending loop of Henle. Now remember, in the first paragraph of this chapter for diuretics, there's always there's a generality. Take note of generalities. All diuretics act from the luminal side, meaning from the urine side. That's what it means. Have you read that? From the luminal side, and asa na siya? The urine side of the epithelium of the proximal convoluted, of the tubules of the kidney. Remember that. Except for which one? Which potassium sparing joint? Spironolactone. Why? Because aldosterone, as a steroid hormone, it has to, where do steroid hormones act? Where are the receptors located? Intracellular, cytoplasmic receptors. You wonder what that means? That's from your biochemistry, by the way. And it will come out again in your in your pharma, in your pathology, the mechanisms, all the way to IM. When you talk about drugs, and you talk about diseases, you talk about steroids. What's the basis? Why is it intracellular again? As a steroid hormone, what is it? What is the classification? Protein, lipid, carbohydrate? Lipid. So obviously it's like a ghost. It will act like a ghost, passing easily through the lipid membrane of the cell. So somehow it will find somewhere it can attach. Can it attach to lipid? Steroid is a form of lipid. It cannot, right? So it has to have a firm foundation inside the cytoplasm, somewhere along. The receptors are located there. That's one reason why it's intracellular. So back to loop diuretics. So indications, clinical applications, heart failure, pulmonary edema, severe hypertension. If you notice, this talks about fluid overload. In severe hypertension, how does it help? It will lessen the load to the heart, which is the what? The preload or the afterload? It will reduce the preload because you talk about preload, it's volume, right? You talk about afterload, it's keyword. What? Or sure. Answer na siya. Answer. It's talking about pressure. What pressure? Peripheral pressure. Mainly, what blood vessel? If you're hypertensive, hugot kaayo you have a very tight aorta. But furosemide doesn't act there. It reduces the blood volume and therefore reducing the preload and therefore the volume venous return to the heart. So if you notice, I'm not just talking about, and I don't want to just yak off mechanisms of action, clinical indications. This is how you study. You always go back to your physiology, to your biochem, to your pathology. Correlate it to where you are now in pathology. And this is how you learn. And how you do not forget because you connected everything. You put the puzzle pieces together. Does this work better for you? It also sounds more interesting. The process, your thought process will be more interesting and it will be so, even if you don't memorize it, it will, because you understood in the process of correlating it, you will not forget it anymore. I don't have notes. When I talk now, I don't have notes. It's innate, it's automatic for me to do that. I don't have an IM background, but that's how I studied it as a student. When I was reviewing for the boards, when I was reading about my patients, correlate. So this is LASIX. In internship, you will encounter a lot of heart failure patients with LASIX, furosemide in their prescription drugs, and the resident will ask you mechanism of action. So it will inhibit sodium potassium chloride transport. And therefore, since sodium remains in the urine, the water will also remain in the urine. Very well said, the resident will say. Okay, what does it do? How does it help in hypertension? What will it address? The preload or the afterload? Very good memory in memorizing mechanism of action and clinical application. But when you get asked about the pathophysiology of it, so you get how you should approach your drugs and to make it more interesting, not just memorizing. Almost done. So in oral parenteral form, you have metabolic hypokalemic alkalosis. Why? Remember, it will inhibit, correlate again the ADR, adverse drug reaction, to the mechanism of action. It will inhibit sodium potassium chloride. It will waste away your sodium potassium chloride. So too much of that can lead to hypokalemia. By the way, why alkalosis? Remember, your chloride also takes part in maintaining that buffer. Somewhere along the way, HCl, diba, recombine na po. So hypokalemia, of course. Remember this, ototoxicity. Very famous question for the toxicity of loop diuretics. Ototoxicity. What antibiotic, by the way? Aminoglycosides. Correlate lang. Murag simang siya, but it jogs up your memory of other things. So it's a sulfonamide, so it can also cause sulfonamide allergy. Remember sulfonamide? Also in antibiotics. So any drug that has a chemical base of being a sulfonamide, pharmacies, in your chemistry, can also cause drug reaction. Any drug labeled as a sulfonamide has a potential to be an allergen. So for the thiazide diuretics, this time sodium chloride only. Transporter in the DCT, distal convoluted tubule. Again, for hypertension, mild heart failure. But why still metabolic hypokalemic alkalosis, especially the hypokalemic? Why does thiazide, like loop diuretics, still cause hypokalemia? Okay, let's go back to histology. What cell is involved in your sodium-potassium exchange? Principal cells. Okay. How do we retrieve the potassium exchange? Intercalated cells. Are you following at the back? We're into histology now. So if you block that exchange there, so sodium remains there, what happens to the potassium? When it blocks, the other systems follow. Right? Because why? It will still affect the gradient of the exchange. If you have less sodium reabsorbed, because sodium is being wasted in thiazide, right? So why potassium is still affected? Because you need that gradient of reabsorbed sodium to exchange for the potassium as well. If If you don't have that gradient for exchange, potassium still remains in the luminal or urine side and it still gets wasted away. Did that confuse you before? That's why you need to go back to the gradients, to osmosis and gradients. Going back to the checklist, look at your checklist again. There's that item there. Describe a therapy that reduces calcium excretion in patients who have recurrent urinary stones. So, clinical application of thiazides, hypercalciuria with stones. You want less calcium to accumulate in the urine or luminal side because the more calcium, the more chances for precipitation and formation of stones. So that's one use. So check that box. There, it's answered. Another in the checklist, just go backtracking. Describe a treatment for severe acute hypercalcemia in a patient with advanced carcinoma. What happens in advanced carcinoma? One of the complications is, in advanced carcinoma, it eats away, it can advance, spread to the bones. It eats away at the bones. What happens to all that calcium in the bones? Goes to the bloodstream, causing increase or hypercalcemia. That's dangerous for the heart as well. So how is that being addressed? There's that paragraph again in your so look at the loop diuretics paragraph. It's there. Page 146, clinical use and toxicities. Less common but important application in the treatment of severe hypercalcemia. This time is the opposite of the effect of thiazide. It will excrete calcium. It will prevent calcium reabsorption. That is why loop diuretics, such as furosemide, is useful for severe hypercalcemia, which can be found in advanced carcinoma. Na-check off na sa checklist. So I hope medyo high yield ito ang discussion today. Potassium-sparing diuretics, examples are spironolactone and etherinone, which is a steroid hormone. Where does it originate? Spironolactone. Natural, in its natural form. What is spironolactone, by the way? It's an analog of what? Audio. Sa mechanism of action. I meant aldosterone earlier. So where does aldosterone originate? What part of the body? What organ? Adrenal cortex. What specific zone? Zona. Glomerulosa. Because fasciculata is for cortisol. And reticulosa is for androgens. It will keep coming up even in board exams. Ha? Remember GFR. Glomerulosa, fasciculata, reticulosa. A, C, A. Aldosterone, cortisol, androgens. So, effect is to reduce potassium excretion. So therefore, it can lead to, obviously, hyperkalemia. Gynecomastia is one side effect for spironolactone only. Other potassium sparing diuretics, this is in your checklist. You are asked to give at least 2, amiloride and triantherine. So amiloride will inhibit the, what's NE? Epithelial sodium chloride, epithelial sodium channels in cortical collecting tubule duct. Reduces sodium reabsorption and potassium excretion. So we've been discussing this. If you want to just trace it anatomically or histologically, you have that drawing there. I might like to use this in my exam. Did I use this last year? I think so, right? For those who went through my pharma last year, I think I used this last year. So naka-number na siya, is coded. It's also in your book. Just the flow and effects. So for the electrolyte changes. So what will cause acidosis? The body pH, blood pH. Carbonic anhydrase and potassium sparing. For alkalosis, thiazides, loop diuretics. You should remember this, especially those interested in mag-IM. Okay, miscellaneous drugs. This is in your Introduction to Autonomic Drugs chapter, the first part of your book. So, what affects the genitourinary smooth muscle? Remember the fight or flight? If you need to fight or flight, do you need to urinate? No, you need to hold it in. So your sphincter should be closed. And your bladder wall should be relaxed. In your anatomy, what's the name for your urinary bladder wall muscle? Professor muscle. So the bladder wall should be relaxed. An effect of the sympathetic nervous system via beta 2. You want to find that in your book? Do you want to review that in your book? Keep going back to that for all the organ systems actually, especially GI. Autonomic drugs, introduction. So that's chapter 6 in Katzum, and you have the table for the effects of autonomic, of sympathetic and parasympathetic. There. Page 53. Page 53 in your Katzum. You have the table there, table 6-3. You go to urinary smooth muscle effects for the bladder wall. With sympathetic, your bladder wall should be relaxed and your sphincter should be contracted. So that you will not urinate while you try to run away or take the exam. Right? Your sympathetic is active. And you feel, during exam, right? You feel your heartbeat increasing, your heart rate increasing, right? That's your sympathetic effect. As well as do you wonder, anong dili mo kaihion? You're less likely to feel like you have to urinate. Unless you're very anxious and it's going crazy na maglain ang tiyan mo. May signals na siya. So, for the bladder wall, it's via beta-2 receptor, sphincter, contraction of the sphincter, alpha-1. Now, when you need to relax, you are relaxed, you're in the comfort room, you're on the potty chair. Finally, your detrusor wall can contract and your sphincter can relax. So that's a function of the parasympathetic. Para-relax. Para-relax. So that's via your M3 receptors. Take notes sa receptors. So back to the miscellaneous, we already reviewed some of your autonomic nervous system on the genitourinary. Oh, there's also what causes ejaculation? Para or sympathetic? Sympathetic. Erection? Parasympathetic. Now, for those familiar, I'm not saying you're doing it, but you're familiar with the act, with the sexual act. Especially guys. Di ba you take your time when you have an erection? Right? You're still relaxed, you're taking your time, whatever it is you do. You're building up, you're watching whatever you're watching. So that's a relaxed activity, right? You're not in a hurry. Malami pa mo. What happens? Especially if it's a male lover with a woman na naibana, naabot ang bana, the husband came home suddenly, unexpectedly. And the male lover has to ejaculate so he can get out of the window. So it's a flight reaction. Remember that, ejaculation so that you can fly away already. Reaction, you're taking your time, you're relaxed, you don't want to rush things. So for the urinary tract antispasmodics, we have examples there. Derifenacin, flavoxate, oxybutynin. I looked this up in the formulary. There's available in the Philippines, Driptane, sulfenacin, tolterodine, and trospin. So mechanism of action relieves smooth muscle spasms by inhibiting the parasympathetic activity by those receptors we previously talked about. What receptor again? M3, which causes the detrusor and urinary muscles to relax. So, clinical use for overactive bladders have symptoms of urinary frequency, urgency, or incontinence. However, side effects would be increased dry mouth because what is responsible for our salivation? The parasympathetics. For secretion, remember, eating is a relaxing activity. That's why you salivate. But if you take an anti-parasympathetic drug, such as for urinary tract antispasmodics, for preventing the spasm, you will have also dry mouth. Constipation, because what helps you to poop? It's still your parasympathetic. Your parasympathetic will stimulate your GI wall so you can move it down. Because you're relaxed, you're in the potty, you're not trying to run away. So other anticholinergic effects. For erectile dysfunction therapy drugs, we have these examples, alprostadil, and I haven't found it in the Philippine, in our local list. Sildenafil, very famously known as Viagra. Adonix, so that you will become like Adonis. There's such a brand name, Adonix. And Tadalafil, Cialis, who walks around Puente area? Around Puente area. I really feel sorry for those elderly foreigners. They get accosted by vendors. Hey Joe, hey Joe. And they get offered Cialis. I really saw the box. It's Cialis. It's offensive for them sometimes, especially if they're here on official business, they're here for decent reasons, they're not out to get young teenage girls. And you also have Vardenafil Levitra. So this is used to treat penile erection dysfunction that results from a lack of blood flowing to the corpus cavernosum. You're done with this in anatomy? Urinary man, di ba? So you've studied the anatomy of the penile shaft. So blood accumulates in the corpus cavernosum, which gives it the erect appearance and the erect consistency. So it usually stems from vascular and neurologic conditions. Vascular, something wrong with the blood flow. Neurologic, especially in what common condition? Diabetes mellitus is not just about the blood sugar, remember? You were under me in biochemistry. I'm sure I explained in detail the mechanism of glycosylation of proteins all over the body, leading to damage of the eyes, the blood vessels, and the nerves as well. So one of the side effects of chronic diabetes mellitus is erectile dysfunction, how it affects the nerves. And of course, how it also affects your blood vessels, your microcirculation. So mechanism of action, it will selectively inhibit the phosphodiesterase type 5 receptors, causing an increase in blood levels of nitric oxide. Now nitric oxide is, another name for it is, remember the old name for it is EDRF, endothelium-derived relaxing factor. So that's your nitric oxide. So this increase in nitric oxide levels activates the cyclic GMP enzyme, which relaxes smooth muscles and allows blood to flow into the corpus cavernosum, causing an erection. Alprostadil, however, acts locally, directly on the blood vessels. Adverse drug reactions. Since nitric oxide, the enhanced production of nitric oxide it's a vasodilator, right? So systemically, you're taking it orally. I hope none of you are taking that yet. So it will cause hypotension because of the vasodilation, not just in the blood vessels leading to the corpus cavernosum, but also systemically. It can cause cardiac events, myocardial infarction, arrhythmia, sudden cardiac death. Why? Again, because of the hypotension or the relaxation of the blood vessels. What happens to your venous return when your peripheral blood vessels relax? It pools. Imagine when you suddenly stand up and your blood pools in your lower extremities and you feel dizzy and you get orthostatic hypotension. That's because your venous return is decreased. And so it's decreased also to your cerebral blood flow. That's why you feel dizzy. Because the blood, with vasodilation, it tends to pool. So less is returned to the heart and there's less blood for pumping. And that's why you just do not get hypotension, aside from the relaxing, but the cardiac events because of the decreased blood flow, venous return to the heart. And that's what this can cause MI. Why MI? You have decreased venous return, you have less circulation for your coronary arteries, causing ischemia and even infarct. You get your pathophysiology. We're talking about erectile dysfunction drugs, but we're still talking about the cardiac effects and we're still integrating, correlating. I hope you can use this kind of approach when you study. Arrhythmia, sudden cardiac death, headache of course, with decreased circulation, dizziness, flushing. Diba? Nag-vasodilate, rosy cheeks din, yan mo gamit ng Viagra, no? I haven't seen it yet. Prolonged erection for more than 4 hours with irreversible damage to penile tissues. Why? Hugot. You're impeding the circulation to the rest to the skin because of the increased pressure. Nahuot man, hugot. You understand that? It's tightened. So you're impeding the circulation to the skin especially. So with more than 4 hours erection, that is not good. You are not Adonis anymore. You are now becoming a zombie, a cadaver, because your penile tissue will start having ischemia and eventually necrosis. You get it? It's not funny study, do not laugh at the patients, will get that complication. But right now, when you think about it as a revenge, you put it to somebody's food. Okay? So, I think we've had an interesting hour. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm still going to use checklists for exams coverage. Okay? I hope the checklists were well covered. Any questions? I actually took the miscellaneous from a very superficial looking book, but it's not superficial in content. Your incredibly easy Pharma book.